Hello, and welcome to the Race, Wealth, and Health Podcast, a podcast that serves to educate and empower while we explore the intersections of social justice, economic empowerment, and holistic well-being within communities of color. I am your host, Dr. Joycelyn Morris, and I invite you to join me as we dive deep into the crucial topics that shape our lives, challenge the status quo, and strive for a more equitable future for all. This week, we're back with part 2 of our conversation with Maria Razo on Women of Impact, Exploring Your Why. Let's tune in. And so, again, continue. So you moved to the second school and you're still kind of doing this work, but now you're clear about your why and you're clear that you're actually passionate about this. So how did that, and was that a turning point for you in terms of the way that you were interacting with your work, with your how?
Yeah. So second school it was another turnaround. And gosh, with turnarounds, it's very traumatic for the humans that are being involved, like the adults, right?
Yeah.
The children, the adults, it's a traumatic experience for everyone because in turnaround, some people have to go, and even though that happened. So when we did the second turnaround, the school was again very, very low performing. And we put in the work. I believe 2 years later, we had the highest API or academic increase in the entire state, right? We were on
Wow.
cloud nine. It was the proudest moment for me till this day, actually. I've not had an experience that has given me so much pride and fulfillment as when it was announced at our school that people didn't really believe anything like that could happen there was in the LA Times and everything of it just having the highest academic increase. Now, it's the same kids. It's not like
Yeah.
kids from a different neighborhood. It was the same kids, the same kids.
In your experience working with turnaround schools, 'cause to your point, right? It's the same kids that were counted out. Like, what was the difference? What did you guys bring to them that allowed them to want to and also feel and know that they were capable
Yeah.
of performing at a higher standard?
Yeah. And I'll only speak to my turnaround experiences because I'm sure many have failed, right?
Yeah.
Turnaround is there for a reason. I think that it was the team of people that were involved in my particular turnarounds.
Mhm.
Nobody wanted to really work at my two schools. Like seasoned professional, seasoned operators, seasoned teachers, they wouldn't leave the school they were in to be hired in one of my turnarounds. And who was left is people like me during a great recession who were young, just recent college grads, and we were just hungry. We were audacious enough to think we could change the world. And I think that
Mhm.
youth and then experience, we just didn't know any better, right?
Mhm.
We had no comparison of, well, my other school used to be this. No, we had nothing. We were just clean slate. And I think that was the secret sauce and the spirit of being able to rally together to serve in the spirit of service. And it was leadership had a lot to do with it, like who we were led by. That person would ask us to jump, and we said how high because we respected her so much.
Mm.
And because we were aligned with the mission and we respected our leader because our
Yeah.
leader would roll up her sleeves and work right in the trenches with us. She was visible, she was present. And so anything she asked, we did. And because of that, the kids felt the difference. And the teachers were able to literally just teach them instead of, but it's when you work in a school, it's not just you do your job and you go home. Like you wear many hats. For example, one of my schools, we had a kid whose mother had been deported, I believe, and whose dad wasn't present. So he'd been living with a neighbor the entire time. And he'd always wait for the leftovers, the fruits, after we served lunch until one of us, I'm like, you're a football player. You're a big kid. Is this why you're so hungry all the time? And then big kid, like 6 feet tall kid, he just broke down and said, no, I'm just hungry because I've been staying with my friend's parents in their home, but I don't want to overstep and I won't eat their food because I don't want to take more from them than they've already given me. Oh, that was heartbreaking, right?
Yeah.
And he wasn't unique.
No.
Every one of our kids had that story. I think we were able to connect with them in a way. that we didn't just look at it as I'm just collecting a paycheck and really good benefits, because the benefits in education are pretty good. Here, it's I'm here and whatever I need to do to serve you, then we're going to do it. I think we pitched in together. We bought him a bike so that he could come to school faster
Yeah.
and better. And then we also made sure that he was able to connect with social services. Our counselors were rock stars in that same.
Mhm.
We had counselors. They were just rock stars in the same way of being trauma informed enough to make sure that they were serving the kids that way. And then I tried very hard not to overstep my role in. I need to focus on operations and make sure that if a kid comes to me and says that, we communicate. We were the A team. We communicated, and it was a holistic approach.
Yeah. It's amazing. And it also sounds like, in addition to the representation, but with by having individuals in leadership who were representative of the populations, there was sort of an automatic cultural competence that was there that helped you guys to not only connect and understand the needs of your students, but to be most effective in communicating that and being able to be very authentic about the support that you were trying to provide for them and not just checking a box or
Mhm.
doing something to better position yourselves for the next, right? The next best thing or for superintendent or whatever it is that maybe would come after that work. And so now tell me that pivot
Mhm.
specifically out of schools. What what was that like for you?
Yeah, so it was in my my final year, 2016. It was January, and I did operations, right? Literally, what did you do in the schools, Maria? Anything that wasn't academic. Sometimes I did feel in the classroom where substitute teachers wouldn't come because it was in a rougher neighborhood. Sometimes we had a hard time filling substitute, and I was a warm body that stayed with the kids until we were able to find a teacher who would step in for the day. And anything that was non academic, I was filling that role. And then in 2016, there was a girl who came into my office and then she had a cut on her leg. And because she was bleeding, I told her that we needed to take her home. You can't have open wounds with other children. And I was going to call her parents. And she said, oh, yeah, no one's going to answer the phone, Miss Razo. I'm like, but why not? Let me just give it a try. Like, everyone's at court right now. My dad is being sentenced. And then I said, oh, it'll probably be nothing. Like, he's going to be okay. He's like, no, it'll probably like be 25 to like, and once she was, there was no, there
Emotion.
was no emotion.
Hmm.
But that was a pivot point for me because I felt nothing. Normally, I would take it home. I would never cry for my kids, but you know, I would take it home. I would carry it. She wasn't the first to have a similar story. A lot of my kids did, and I always felt for them. And the numbness I felt was reflected in the numbness she felt. And that's when I knew I needed to walk away because I stopped being of service. And if I stayed longer, I would ruin their experience through my bitterness because that is the turning point of someone becoming bitter about their job. So I
Mm.
decided then and there that I needed to get out. And a lot of people burn out a lot faster than me, I guess. But I had a slow burn and eventually I did. And what I started thinking about was my why and how I can continue to be of service to put a dent in childhood poverty, but not in the same role because I work directly with the kids. I work directly inside of the schools, but I
Mhm.
didn't feel that the change was happening at the system. And I'm curious, right? So curiosity is a trait I have is what does systemic change look like? What does impact at scale look like?
Mm.
And I had a colleague who really respected. He worked in operations in Green Dot in my same organization. And I sent him an email that said, hey, I think I'm ready to move to something else, but I still want to be in the work. If there's anything that comes your way, I've never done anything different. I'm not sure what to look for. Let me know. And immediately it was, why don't you check out the role here at my new organization? And it was as I ended up at the Broad Center afterwards.
And who was his colleague? Because this sounds like a colleague who was likely very well connected. Let's talk about that too, because the Broad Center carries quite a bit of weight in terms of the work that they do and rather prestigious. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, no. Shout out to Eric Freed.
Okay.
Eric Freed was my first, well, he became my boss, my first leader. I don't want to say boss. Eric's not a boss. Eric is a leader. And he said, there's an operations role that's going to open up in my team because the person that had been doing it with him was leaving the center. And he said, why don't you just apply, come meet, see if it's something that you want to pursue. So he led operations at the central office in Green Dot. And from there, he went on to Broad. And what I learned from Eric's mind is just incredible, where Eric can break down anything into tiny little parts and he can see how everything relates to each other. Like that, I learned so much from him. But more importantly, Eric gave me a chance where if he had not vouched for me, I don't think Bro would have given me a second look. I know that. I know that because I don't fit the profile of one Bro residents, Bro colleagues that ended up working in there. I mean, I worked in turnaround schools in Watts in South Central Los Angeles for my entire career up until that point. My
Mhm.
office was between a recycling plant and an abandoned building where we had spotty internet. So sometimes when we had internet, I sat down in the steps of the front of the school to try to get Wi-Fi. Like that was my office. And I'm driving to West Los Angeles, right? In the Fox Plaza is where the building was. And the building itself is very famous. Like tourists come and they take pictures with the building. It was just a complete 180 from where I was before. So I never thought I had the chance. So what I did in the beginning, transparently, is that I needed to practice interviewing. So I took that as a chance to hone my interview skills.
Mhm.
Like if I don't, I'm probably not gonna make it in, but I'm going to see what interviewing is like. I've been interviewed since I left college.
Right.
I know I don't have those skills. So I took that opportunity as if I get it, I get it. If I don't, I don't. But I think that comfort that came with that security of if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. This is just me practicing interviews. It's
Mhm.
probably it has a lot to do with the confidence I went in into my interviews. And it was a long process. It was
Mhm.
also a 2.5 hour drive from where I lived to West LA. So I was like, "Oh, it's so far. Can I really do this long term?" It was the greatest professional development experience of my life once I got it.
Mm.
Once I
And
got it. It's amazing.
and tell our listeners about the Broad Center, because while I am familiar with it, not everyone is. So tell us a little bit more about what the Broad Center is and the work that they do.
Yeah. So the Bro Center was 20 years old as of 2020. It was birthed by Becca Bracy Knight. Shout out to Becca. And it's in 2020, it moved to the Yale School of Management. And that is how my story at Broad ended because it moved to New Haven. But the purpose of the Broad Center was under the Broad Foundation, which has different arms, health care, education, the museum, the arts. And so we were the education arm of the foundation. And the concept was that where people that were working in corporate America have certain skills that would be really valuable to the central office. That's key. We were not in the classroom. Central office of the school systems. And we've got people that have an operations background. So they were directors of operations at Fortune 500s. The skills were non education. They weren't like a history teacher or a psychology teacher. It was very like our post MBA students. And they wanted to come into education because they've reached a point in their life or career that they just wanted to do something bigger than themselves.
Mhm.
But the ed world, and you know that, is weird. And I still count myself as we in the education world are very nichey and we don't like outsiders. So what the Broad Center did was work within the systems to place or to match high caliber talent from the outside of the central offices in the finance, the operations. And then they did that for maybe 20 years. It was a very competitive program. I'm not sure what it is like now at Yale. I'm sure that it's doing excellent. But it was very competitive. And we had relationships across the nation with public schools, and many Brodies are out there still doing the work. You have the experience, Joycelyn, I think, of being adjacent to the Brodies.
Adjacent, yes. Yeah, I went through the interview process, which and to your point is absolutely very competitive. And I think we may have a colleague or two even at MLT
And we do.
who's actually done Broad. So
Mhm.
yeah, no, it's a great organization. And personally it was something I had considered literally in that exact realm, leaving corporate America and thinking about the bigger impact and the type of work that I wanted to do, which is part of like where this podcast comes from, right? Just the idea of education and thinking about the ways that education is a lot of different things, and it doesn't just look like sitting in a classroom and learn. So you left road and of course came to MLT, right? Where you're continuing the great work with our underrepresented populations and a different way, as I think you like to say, around your why. How has race and wealth either shown up for you personally and professionally?
Yeah. Since I've always done mission-driven work,
Hmm.
I've always been in an environment where being brown was fine, where we can have these conversations and it's what we do, is what we breathe. Like, it's not uncomfortable for
Yeah.
me. I used to travel for work with Broad because we were doing sessions or recruitment. And also, when I worked with the Broad alums, we were doing development events for them in different states. I live in a bubble in California, in Los Angeles. Fair. And so, me venturing out, very innocent. And what I noticed was that everyone looked at me as in the hotels, especially staying in really nice hotels. And it was asking me for help because I probably worked there because
Hmm.
yeah, look, and asking me questions of, "Wait, where are you from?" "Oh, I'm from Los Angeles." "No, but where are you really from?" So that was the first time I experienced that. For me, it was one of those, it finally happened, right? It
Yeah.
finally happened. Because everybody who's a person of color gets that question eventually,
Hmm.
but live in a bubble in Los Angeles, it doesn't happen that often, at least. There
Right.
are bubbles here that I stay away from on purpose for my safety. But and then the other one was the pride in the service people when they would interact with me. It brought me to tears at times, where especially people were around the age of my parents, and
Hmm.
they were the servers, the cleanup crew. They would come up to me and I would speak to them in Spanish, and to them it was, "Oh my gosh, what?" Because this was mostly, like, especially in the South, in the East, South there, where I don't normally go, and it was my first time there, and it was just the pride in their face, like, "Oh, one of us made it. One of us made it." It was just it was so hopeful.
Yeah.
So, one, it was just being othered,
Hmm.
and then one group was embracing me, all
Yeah.
in the same,
Hmm.
and that's how it's been. But because I only work in mission driven
Hmm.
organizations, that was different for me. Versus when I talk to my sister and my siblings who work in corporate, they have very different experiences
Yeah.
where you don't talk about race at work. They don't. The DI is not a thing. Like, you bring up DI and you're gonna get bullied in work. So I'm very sensitive to race, wealth, health, you know, as it pertains to people of color. And I talk about it freely and I talk about it so comfortably, where it's a privilege
It
to
is.
be able to let it not be attacked.
It is. It absolutely is a privilege. And yeah, it's something I try not to take for granted, the privilege that we have to be able to work in the spaces that we do. As we think about wealth and going back to your why, which is ending childhood poverty, what has been your personal wealth journey or wealth building journey? What does that look like for you, either individually or for you as your family? I know you mentioned all of your siblings are in corporate. How has this, sort of arc, or I wouldn't say ended because you guys are also here, but how is this arc sort of developing in present day?
Yeah. So, oh man, it's 4 out of 4. My parents had 4 kids, and I call the 4 of us success stories.
Hmm.
So, mom statistically, my mom and dad can check off that box. Like, they really set us up. They went from, "We've survived, and now we're in the thriving phase," of what they wanted for us. So, my siblings went the route that most children of lower income parents or immigrant parents go, which is, "Where can I make the most money?"
Yeah.
Because that is that my parents wanted me to thrive. The way that you thrive is your basic needs are met.
Yeah.
And to meet your basic needs, you need money. So that is where they went. Me, when I ended up in nonprofit in education, I always knew that I wouldn't build wealth with the work I do. I can have one or the other, right? I can have this
Sure.
very passionate, fulfilling work that I love doing, or I can go the other route, like with my siblings, and then make a lot of money.
Mhm.
So I had to compensate. And the way that I did that, I was really young, where it's real estate. I figured that I was in my early 20s when I invested for the first time in real estate.
Wow.
And the thing about a young person is that there's no fear, because I said the worst that can happen is lose the house. My credit is ruined for 7 years. I'm 22, 23 years old. Like, I'll rebuild. And the audacity in that statement right now scares me,
Right.
because current Maria, oh, that's a huge risk. I invested my tiny little savings, everything I had into that, and it worked out. So that one happened. Then I invested in a second one later on with a bit more fear,
Mhm.
because I was older and I had more to lose.
Yeah. Were you
And
living in either of these, or these were just
they're
investment
rentals,
properties? Just
they're
rentals.
investment properties.
Okay.
Yeah. And then last May was the third one.
Okay. So where did you learn that that could be a potential pathway to building wealth for yourself?
It was actually my parents' idea.
Really? Okay.
Right. Like, kind of, if they could, they would have.
Ah. Mhm.
And like, we all poured in so that they could afford their house, I think 20 years ago or something. And they were able to buy kind of high, 'cause it was, I think, before the
Ah.
real estate bubble. But what I noticed, because, I helped them refinance. Like, my parents also still don't speak English. My mom has second grade education. My dad has a fifth grade education. So
Mm.
anything that has legal documents, legal jargon, anything, I read first before they sign. And everything, I've been doing that since I was 6 or 7 when I learned how to read. So what I noticed was the house was appreciating in value. It's like, oh, what? In a year, the house made
Yeah.
this much. It made
Mhm.
more than my salary? That's a crazy talk. So when I had the opportunity, and my siblings and I had opportunities, the four of us, we started investing in real estate, because it's real. You can touch it.
Yeah.
And it really, if you're just patient and you sit on it,
Mhm.
and patience is something that we have. The four of us were very patient. It'll appreciate so much, to the point where you can retire eventually. My dream and my hope is that one of the homes is pretty much already paid for. It should be in the next 6 years or so. It'll be completely paid for, and it would start off as an investment property. But now I think of it as, man, it was built in 2009, so it's pretty new
Mhm.
considering, like, houses are built 100 years ago.
Right.
Uh,
Absolutely.
and like, my mom and dad can move in there, live there, and they don't have to worry about a thing,
Yeah.
because they're still paying off their own house. So
Yeah.
if they were to rent out the house where they're currently in, the rental income could subsidize their Social Security, because now they're retired, they're in their 60s. They've retired and they get the very, very bare minimum from Social
Yeah.
Security. They
Yeah.
didn't have a retirement plan. And don't get me wrong, a lot of people just don't plan. And then their kids kind of pay the consequences for it. My mom and dad, that's not their that's
Right.
not what happened.
Yeah.
They literally poured everything they had into us, which is why they ended up in a situation where there's no retirement plan
Mhm.
for them. So I always knew that would happen, and I prepared. So real estate was one thing that I gravitated towards, and it's been working out, knocking on wood. So that is a way that I subsidize my passion, which is prop work, which doesn't really pay a lot. I mean, you and I make enough so that we're not starving, but we're never going to be rich off of this, right?
Right.
And we shouldn't. It's mission driven work. You should not be to become rich off. I also started just educating myself. Another thing about, I'll just figure things out myself. It's something that is not a good trait in me. And I don't, if I can help it, I don't suggest it. Ask for help, ask for advice.
Yeah.
Don't be like me in that, where I've been educating myself into what is a high yield savings account. So then I opened high yield savings accounts. I tell that to my siblings, and we share information that way. What is the best stock brokerage app that I can buy stocks in and just sit on them? How do you know what stocks to buy? Like,
What's a good stock? Right.
all those things. And then retirement plans, right? So for me, I decided not to have children. I decided not to have children because I knew that my parents would eventually get really old. And I don't feel that the children have an obligation to take care of their parents. I feel that my parents just deserve it so much, because they've
Mhm.
just so wonderful. So no, it's not a martyr thing for me. It's
Yeah.
not, "Oh, it's my obligation, I have to do it." No. It's they've just been so wonderful that it is a privilege for me to be able to give them an amazing life now. Now they're traveling to Mexico when they want to. Their bills, their mortgage, everything is paid for. Like, they don't have to worry about health things. I kind of feel like the tables turned in terms of I want to give them the life in their final years that they should have had all along. But I can't give children the same life that I would want to give them.
Mhm.
And I think I just love my unborn children so much that I won't put them through that. So I
Yeah.
decided to not to have kids. But I've got my retirement plans from my jobs
Yep.
that accrue. So when you leave a job and you have a retirement plan where they're matching you, don't
Mhm.
close it down, don't cash out, just let it go. 10 years later, you're going to see the fruits of that, of just forgetting that it's even there. And it could just keep, they're just going to keep reinvesting in compounded interest, right?
Right.
You're going to win at the end. So I've just been able to figure things out where I am going to be okay in my later years and not just survive, but I'm going to thrive.
Yeah.
And my parents get to thrive now.
Yeah. From survival to thriving. I love that. As we sort of wrap up, what would you want like listeners to take away from today's conversation? When you think about like the information you shared, your personal journey.
Uh, I think that you're able to be both fulfilled and comfortable and living a decent life. And by
Mhm.
decent is that not only are your basic needs met, but there's also some leftover for you to be fulfilled in your personal endeavors. It's not one or the other. It's not I can either make a ton of money and work 20-hour days and not even have enough time to spend it. And then, no, it's if you're disciplined enough,
Yeah.
you can do both that. And also, I don't pursue happiness, I pursue fulfillment.
Hmm.
Happiness comes and goes, fulfillment is permanent.
Yeah. I love that. I was going to ask you for a quote and you beat me to it because I think that that is an
Thank you.
amazing quote. Yeah. Because happiness is so circumstantial.
Yeah.
But fulfillment is something that can be foundational. And I love this. I love this, Maria. I think I want to really thank you for this conversation. One of the things I wanted to ask, you mentioned earlier, and I really loved it. The younger Maria was audacious enough, I think you said, because I literally wrote it down, was audacious enough to think that she could change the world. Does today's Maria still feel that way? And if so, how do you maintain that? The audacity in spite of everything that has gone on in this country
Yeah.
around the work as it relates to advancing equity.
Yeah. No, no. Think that's a really great question. Yeah. I'm still audacious enough to think that I can change the world, but have a different definition of what the world is. And then it comes from my mom. My mom said, every person's a world. If you can change one person, you've changed the world. If you can impact a person, you've impacted the world. And that is the way I see the world now. It's one person at a time, do
Yeah.
the best I can with what I have.
Hmm.
And it's just about perception, right?
Yeah.
Things are neither good nor bad, they just are.
Yeah.
So if I look at things in a negative way, yeah, they're all negative. If I look at things realistically or in a positive way, then
Yeah.
my experience changes.
Yeah.
My experience, which is what matters, right? My experience changes. So
Absolutely.
while it can be very demoralizing to try to chip away at systemic injustices in the education system, in corporate America, wherever we are, if you think about it in a way that there's no hope and you remove hope from it, then you tell yourself you just wasted your entire life trying to make change here. But if you define it as one person is a world and I've at least impacted one person,
Hmm.
it's fulfilled.
That's listen, I'm really excited for our listeners to hear this conversation because I feel like it was a conversation I needed to hear. And when it comes to doing this work, because sometimes it just is unnecessarily hard. But your story has been so inspiring and encouraging. And I just want to thank you for taking the time and trusting me with this, with your story and with your space, and for being just such an amazing human being and individual and all the work that you do. Thank you so much, Maria. I know you're on LinkedIn, so I'll make sure that I include that. But again, thank you. Like you have poured so much into me, and I'm really excited for our listeners to hear this conversation.
No, thank you. It's been an honor and a privilege. Every time I get to talk about my mom and my dad, and I am a reflection of them. So thank you for saying that, because you're saying it to them and a testament to the work that they've done as they try to raise four worlds.
Yeah. Four worlds. I love it. I love it. Well, thank you, Maria. I hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thank you. Take care.
Well, that's all for today, folks. Enjoyed the show? Be sure to like and rate the podcast. You can find the Race, Wealth, and Health podcast on multiple platforms, including Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe and turn on your notifications so you never miss an episode. I also want to hear from you, so don't forget to connect with me on social media. You can follow the podcast on Instagram and Facebook at Race Wealth Health. By joining the online community, you'll stay updated on the latest episodes, behind the scenes insights, and engaging discussions. Share your thoughts, comments, and questions there. I appreciate your support in sharing the podcast with your friends, family, and colleagues who may also find value in these conversations. Thank you again for joining me on this journey. Until next time, take care, stay informed, and keep up the good fight for equality.